Today we are ranking the rookie wide receivers, and we're going to do it like we did the running backs last week. We're taking the rankings from PFF, we're taking the top wide receivers, we're putting them into tiers. The next time when we rank the wide receivers, the following week or so, we're going to add a few wide receivers to it, and we'll keep unloading more wide receivers to the list as we keep ranking the wide receivers. But before we dig in, you need to click that subscribe button right now, because we're looking at these rookie drafts every day. We're looking at these rookies. We're strategizing. We're looking at player values. We're helping you build your dynasty team, and it all starts right here. Rookie draft season is really right now because you got to get prepared. So click that button. Stop missing out. So we're looking at the top 5 rookies from PFF plus one, because they forgot about one, and I knew we were going to get a lot of questions about that wide receiver in the comments, so I just threw them in. So we're looking at 6 wide receivers today. Are they my top 6? We'll see as we go through them, but very interesting options as we go through these rookie wide receivers here. But let's start off with our first wide receiver off the list, and we're looking at T-Mac. T-Mac has a high probability of getting drafted in the top 10, and he's going to get draft capital. He's one of the few wide receivers that people are hands down looking at as a top prospect. I have seen some negatives from people on social media, mainly about contested catches and amount of them, but I like him a lot. I like his ball skills. I like his ability to get downfield. I like his average depth of target. That is a metric I like to look at on wide receivers. We have back-to-back years of mega production. We have good production as a freshman. More than likely, we'll have the draft capital speak to this as well. You look at the rest of the wide receiver pool, it's not as deep as other years, especially on the top end. So when you're looking at a wide receiver like this, it makes it a little bit easier to pull the trigger unless you have other running backs to look at. When I think about T-Mac compared to the wide receivers who are already established in the league and player values, I think he can compete with some of the top guys. I think the odds of him getting to that Jamar Chase category is going to be hard, but that's going to be hard for any top wide receiver in the draft class. And if I go back a couple years, that Quentin Johnston, Jordan Addison draft class, I think when I put him up against JSN, who was the wide receiver 1 per consensus that year, I would have him ahead of that because 1, he's healthy, 2, back-to-back big productive seasons, getting downfield, getting a good ADOT. I think T-Mac has a lot of upside, and the draft capital is projected to be much higher than what those wide receivers landed at. So that being said, he's going to get the opportunities to fail and succeed at the next level, and everything's looking good with this prospect, especially when you look at the market sentiment. I think the market sentiment's huge for T-Mac, and when I think about that and I put that in the rankings there, I think I gotta put him in S tier. I gotta put him in the top tier. But when I think about S tier compared to like the running back position, compared to previous years at wide receivers, when I think about like a Malik Neighbors, the S isn't in bold. It isn't as strong as previous years, but compared to market, to the other wide receivers in this rookie class, it makes sense, especially when I look at the rookie draft capital, the market consensus, what we see on the field, and the production metrics. We're looking at our next wide receiver off the PFF rankings, and we're putting them into tiers. And this guy's got a lot of talent. There are some naysayers to him, which is understandable, especially when you look at the production profile a little bit, especially from a counting stat standpoint. But when you look at the talent on the field, you look at Luther Burden, he is a mega producer on the field. He's a guy that Mizzou tried in any way, shape, or form to get him on the field his freshman year, to get him touches. That's why you're seeing extra carries that season. They're trying to get him on special teams. They're trying to get him on end of rounds and stuff like that. The production dipped this year, but he's a talented player. He's a guy that's going to go in the first round. Odds are saying first round draft pick. He's going to get opportunity to prove himself. The draft capital should be there. It's not like it's a deep wide receiver class where he could get diluted down a little bit. I think the talent's there. It is immense. Big time prospect coming out of high school. Are we living on that a little bit? Maybe with the market sentiment. However, we were productive, especially that second year. The highlights are untrue. He's good after the catch. He's also good in the short to intermediate as well. This is a player that can really be transcendent at the next level, can also help his NFL team very good. This is a player that has good odds of delivering for your fantasy team, especially at a good price tag. When I think about Luther Burden and how he should be ranked, especially among this wide receiver class, I like him, especially at cost, because I'm going to get him down the board a little bit, which I think that's going to be a good price tag for a first-round wide receiver. Like, it's going to be after some running backs, and T-Mac's going to be off the board, and Luther Burden's a good guy to look at. Middle-ish of the first round, depending on how the running backs go in the NFL draft. I think that's rather lucrative for Luther Burden. So I have him ranked in tier A. Like, I think we got some upside to him where he can surprise you a little bit. I think in the wrong situation, he could be a little bit of a Debbie Downer. But when I look at Luther Burden, I've liked him coming out of high school. I liked what he did and the opportunities he got as a freshman. I think this is a player that can be a guy that helps you out in fantasy for a long time, like many of these other top wide receivers that we're looking at today. The next wide receiver we're looking at here off the PFF rankings is a very nuanced playmaker, and he's got some upside to his game. He's had some downside over his career due to injuries, but he can really make it happen because he's got a good release package. He can create separation. That's Emeka Egbuka. Emeka Egbuka here, 824 yards in 2024, 9 touchdowns, but broke out as a sophomore in 2022. We have injuries mixed in. This is a former 5-star recruit. This is a guy that held strong at Ohio State. He has a 10 touchdown season, 9 touchdown season, and he's very reliable. He could be a good 1B wide receiver, 2 wide receiver for his new NFL team. He could have a good role where he's seeing some production. He could have a role where in a higher volume passing offense, let's say he falls to the Commanders somehow, or the Commanders trade up a bit, and they get him alongside Terry McLaurin with Jane Daniels throwing the rock. It's something like that situation-wise in the NFL, with a quarterback that pushes it, with another good wide receiver on the other side. I think you can catch something with Emeka Egbuka. I think you can catch some good volume out of him. I think he could be a good dynasty asset due to that, especially for the long term. A guy that could be volatile a bit due to that, but I can also see how he could be a little bit more than that as well due to the route running, due to the dependability. However, the wide receiver position and the NFL level is very diluted vastly, and it's going to be after the running backs. Like, the running back run's going to happen of like the top 4 or 5 guys, and then you're looking at Emeka Egbuka before we go to that next like slosh or tier or whatever you want to call it of running backs. And that being said, when you're looking at Egbuka, draft capital is more than likely going to be there. Being a first rounder, it's going to happen. The odds of him sliding to day 2 are not very good, because it's not like the wide receiver draft class is diluted with talent. He's going to be a first rounder. He's been a first rounder for a long time now. He's got the talent to do so. When you run a bunch of mock drafts off the PFF mock draft simulator, it dries up quick at the wide receiver spot. Some of these teams need a wide receiver. Emeka Egbuka is NFL ready with the route running in hands. He's very dependable. That is something you want to see. When I think about ranking or putting him into tiers in this draft class and ranking him among this draft class, I would have to put him in tier A with Luther Burden. I think that's a good fit for him. I think putting him any lower, that's really making things a little dicey, because I see him being on the field. I see him getting some opportunities. Might be a good role player with good wide receiver 2 potential. Could extend out the more, but he's a guy that's going to get opportunities to prove himself, opportunities to fail as well. And that's what you're asking for when you're looking at wide receivers in the first round of your rookie draft after the running back runs. After those running back runs and the top of this class has been zapped out, I think wide receivers are going to look a little different compared to other years. I think Emeka Egbuka here at this spot of the draft is going to be looking nice. Now we're going to be looking at the wide receiver PFF didn't rank. I think if you connect the dots, you know who I'm going to talk about here, and that's Travis Hunter. When I think about Travis Hunter, I'm Barry Bazing. Like, I do not know where they exactly put him in when it comes to ranking tiers or whatnot, or evaluating for Dynasty. Most people are not drafting till after the draft anyway, so you get to look at the team. You get to look at some of the news that comes out. You know he's going to be playing some corner, or a lot of corner, almost all corner, and maybe sprinkled in at wide receiver. If we're just sprinkled in at wide receiver, that's really not going to be enough volume to help you in fantasy football. But it could be enough if he's getting 10 to 20 routes per game, if not a little bit more, and an okay route participation rate, rocking what, at 60%, 50%? That might be enough for him to earn enough targets here and there to give you some splash production. I do not know if you want that in the first round. However, if we're more wide receiver heavy than cornerback, or they allow him to just go both ways because they paid up for him and they said, what the heck, this is what we want, this is what we saw in college, then we got a different question to answer. So, by feeling, after the draft, his ranking's going to be up, down, or around. That I did with a few other prospects last year, like Elad McConkey. I was like, I'm holding him here in the middle, and I'm moving him up and down depending on where he goes. Same with Keon Coleman, and the drafts prior, I did the same thing with some other players. Because I've seen that happen before, where in my gut, I knew I was going to move that player up or down, depending on landing spot. And I think this all started with Alvin Kamara. I was watching him play, and I was like, right situation, this guy takes over the league. Wrong situation, he may not get targeted in the passing game correctly in this area of the NFL, which was back in the day when he was first a rookie. But he landed with the Saints, I had to jump him up. So I just want to be transparent in the beginning, because if I got to jump him up, then it's just going to look weird to you. If I got to drop somebody down, it's going to look weird to you. When I think about ranking him right now, I'm thinking about draft capital, I'm thinking about production, but I do not have all the answers because all the information is not out yet. I'm just going to throw him in tier A. I think that's rather safe. I'm looking at market sentiment. Market sentiment's rather high on him. When it comes to mock drafts, he's still getting drafted rather high. That being said, Travis Hunter is okay in tier A. We're going to our next tier, wide receivers. It's going to get rather interesting. I have other wide receivers I want to mention, but I'm not, because I'm holding true to the process here of using somebody's rankings, this time PFFs, and just rolling with what we get. We're looking at this next wide receiver here, Isaiah Bond. Isaiah Bond's got all the talent in the world. That's the thing about him. He's very electric. He's very smooth. Production-wise at Texas, he did not hit. He did not hit this year. And maybe he comes out, maybe he doesn't. Maybe we catch some news after this video that he does or not. But when you look at 532 yards and 5 touchdowns, I can't be confident that I want to go out for the NFL draft. 1.91 yards per route ran. Like, you may want to go out for another season, and coming out right now might be a hindrance to your draft stock, because why would I anoint Isaiah Bond, who couldn't take over at the college level, over a lot of these other wide receivers? Like, why would I pay up for that? Because there's other positions. I can draft edge rushers and 3 techs and stuff. Why would I do that when I know I can find wide receivers later, the next year, or through free agency? So that's a big question here. So when I'm looking at Isaiah Bond, I see a lot of potential, a lot of upside with this kid. We see this on the field. We see that with the highlights. We had some big moments this year, but not enough production really to make us feel good. The talent's there, though. He's talented enough where in the right situation and getting opportunity, and developing, getting better, he could be a good fantasy asset for the long term, because he has that in his potential. We went from Alabama to Texas. We were on the field at Texas. We transitioned quickly to Texas, but we were not productive quickly at Texas. I think he should go back another year and develop. I think that's best for Isaiah Bond. We're looking at him right now, but he's a very talented wide receiver. Still talented. We just need a little bit more to him. I will put him in tier B. I want to watch and see what happens with him. I want to watch him more throughout the draft season. I want to watch him at the combine. I want to watch and see where he goes in the NFL draft. I'm highly interested in him in this standpoint. The next wide receiver we're going to be looking at, I've seen him in a lot of mock drafts. The PFF mock draft simulator has him up pretty high. I saw him cook some routes. It has me intrigued. There's other wide receivers that I like as well. It's not my rankings, because it forces my hand to look at some of these players, and really, it forced my hand to look at Emeka Egbuka a little bit more. And why? Because I want to study these players and get better at my process with them. And what I saw is a wide receiver that did very well against Travis Hunter in 2023. He cooked him. It blew up social media. We go back and look at that catch at the end of the game. There were some plays where he created a lot of separation. And then there's other moments, especially this year. Look at that NC State game. 4 catches, 108 yards, and a touchdown. There are some moments he cooks in the route running department. He is very good releasing off the line of scrimmage. He can break off routes pretty good, especially for his size above 200 pounds at around 6'2" range. The size is looking steady. What I don't like about him is he's not twitched up. He's not overly electric, but that route running prowess he has will get him on the field. Will allow him to climb depth charts, especially, and he's getting mocked in the first round a lot. Good production at Stanford, not counting stat-wise, but over 30% market share. So we did everything we could do in our offense. And the tape, what I see is a good functional wide receiver who's very dependable with a my ball mentality. Against Travis Hunter, he showed that. He showed you he can be aggressive. He comes back to the football. I like that out of wide receivers. However, we saw wide receivers in last year's draft like Brendan Rice, good route runner, aggressive, not overly twitched up, fall in the draft. I think with this wide receiver pool, I don't see him falling in the draft. I see him being like a riser here in the next few weeks. I see a lot of people thinking about talking him up over here in the next few weeks due to that, and I see some upside. When I think about ranking him right now, when I think about the market sentiments, the Dynasty fantasy community isn't very high on him right now when it comes to mock drafts. I've not seen him mocked in a first round of a rookie draft yet. I've not seen that. I would put him B tier, and I'm very fluid with that B tier. I also got more wide receivers I think I want to put in that B tier, and I think as we make the tiers more stretched out, we might have these B tier guys move around a little bit more as we fully flesh out these wide receivers. But we're really working with 3 tiers right now because we only got 6 wide receivers. 5 wide receivers from PFF. And I threw in Travis Hunter because I did not want to answer questions, honestly. They have him as a corner. They got him ranked as a corner. I'm just throwing him in there just in case. He's a very talented prospect. But when I look at this wide receiver class, less in depth. But when I look at wide receivers coming out of high school, wide receivers are more nuanced, more ready to go in the route running department than ever before. And you're going to find wide receivers in the middle to later rounds of the NFL draft that will surprise you here and there. And that's going to happen because the technique is higher when it comes to the wide receiver department. I'm looking at linebackers off the huddle tape, and they're getting thrown out there at wide receiver, and they're breaking off routes. We've seen that a few times on the channel. 1 or 2 last year. We already saw 1 this year. That is happening. Linebackers that can break off routes, pretty crispy. Crispier than some of the top recruits from recruiting classes from like 7 to 8 years ago. So that's what we're seeing here from the route running department. The route running department's a little bit diluted, so you need a little bit more than that to be crispy, to be good at the NFL level. But that is something to think about as you get later in these drafts, especially this year, next year, year after a course of time. You're going to be hit with some late round prospects that become gems that you weren't thinking about. Let me know what you think in the comments below. Make sure to hit that subscribe button on the way out. One thing for watching. Catch you on the next video.